please raise your hand if you have any issues or questions about the platform, about getting onto Canvas. Cassie, why don't you tell us where we are with respect to the administrative stuff?
As far as the Canvas, I have 8 people that haven't accepted the invitation to join Canvas yet. It shows as pending. And when it's pending, that means that you've told me your email and I've added you, but you have to acknowledge that. So that's where we are. Otherwise, you should be in. And I think I've sent out a message through Canvas to people to let you know that if you go to your account setting, you can change the time zone to your local time zone. But I designed the Canvas calendar around Central Time, and I've tried to put in the notes or a description about the mosquito meetings, what time that is. Yeah, that's as far as I got. The links to recorded videos. If you've missed a presentation or want to review something again, will always be in the calendar on the date of that presentation. So you'll look for it. I'll throw out the Go Cassie, and I'll put in the link to the recording for past meetings that are recorded for you.
Okay, that's perfect.
These webinars are different. Those come out with Miss Baggio and Miss Miller, and those are the ones that you have to pick 5 of to go to. So look at those in advance. Make sure your calendar is clear so you can just do those 5. You don't have to write anything if you do those 5. And then you can go from there.
Okay, good. That wasn't clear to me either. So thank you, Cassie, for that. Another question that people have had, and Michelle, I see you. We're going to get you in just a second. Another thing that people have mentioned is, I don't understand this ArcGIS thing. You don't have to worry about that at all until, once Cassie has your professional email, we will put it into the analysis platform, but we're not going to touch that for at least another week. So no worries there. And, it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. And my husband is a volunteer firefighter, so I know what that means. But anyway, things will settle down. It will begin to run smoothly, and it will be organized. And I think it will be not hard to figure out what you are and what you're doing. So Michelle, go ahead and tell us what your question is.
So I've already been in Canvas and I was accepted into the course, but last night I was logged out, and then when I logged back in, it said that I didn't have any courses, and I'm not quite sure how to get back into the course. I haven't really used Canvas.
Are you looking at the email that I sent earlier that said that you have to log in at the visitor portal?
Yeah, I used the link that you gave me, and I logged in with Google, which is how I created the account. I wasn't sure if that's how I was supposed to do it.
Mm-hmm. You just have to click on the visitor portal, and it should pick up the email that was used when you joined then. But I did forward your question on to Peter, who is our Canvas expert, and he'll be online on Tuesday.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I got an email from him.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. People who have been sorry, Rusty. If you've been telling me your Globe Observer ID, check the June 3rd. It says Globe ID. There's a Google form to fill in that is your first and last name, your Globe ID number, and that's where you want to do it rather than sending it to me.
Okay, thank you. And when I call you, just tell me how to pronounce your name. So this is Aitan?
It's Aitan.
Aitan, nice to meet you, Aitan.
Nice to meet you too. So I think it was Cassie was saying something about 5 different things that we have to schedule, and then if we make it to those, then we don't have to write anything. So if we're not sure if we're going to be able to make it to 5 of those, because we have things this summer, things within around the same time as the program, what would we have to write, and when would we have to have that in?
those are the webinars that were organized by Miss Baggio, and there's June is like full of things, in July, and you all got her schedule, but you can look on our calendar too. I prefaced the one with C's. I think there's probably close to 17 or 20 different presentations. So hopefully you can find 5 of those that would work into your schedule. But Miss Baggio's requirement is that you attend at least 5, and that if you miss them, then you're to watch a recording of another one and write down what you learned, apparently.
And so we can find the meetings on Canvas, like the schedule for them is on Canvas.
Yep.
And what are they called? What are these meetings called? Like, do they have a separate name?
It's the C's Speaker series. I think I prefaced it with C's Speaker.
Okay, thank you.
And then our presentations, I put Mosquito in the first part of it.
Thank you.
Isn't it wonderful being part of an internet, what is it, a pan USA project with 2 different hubs that are organizing it? Oh my gosh, really complicated. Is there anyone else who would like to say something before we get started? Hi. Yeah, Juliana, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I have one quick question on the introduce yourself submission portal. It says that there should be a template we should follow. That's not showing up on my end. Should we, is there a template? Am I missing something?
Yeah, that you can read down, if you read down further, it just says, introduce yourself, tell us, why you're in C's, and maybe a couple things for us to remember you by, so that when I see the name Juliana, I can say, oh yeah, she's the one who, it just helps us to build that recognition. And also by finding out where you are, you can find other people, other interns that are near you, or if you found someone that also has a real strong interest in coding in R or something, you guys might find each other. That's the whole reason for that. So thank you, Juliana. Just write what other people are writing. You'll be fine.
All right, awesome, thanks.
It wasn't really a template. I think Peter kind of made it sound more official than it was. Hey, Philippe.
Yeah, first off, I just wanted to thank you for the effort and the opportunity that you guys are giving us, really. And my question was about the hours for the weekly activity tracker. How exactly is that supposed to work?
I sent there's another, it's a Google Sheet, and you download it and save it on your own system, and you keep track of your own hours. And there's different categories in that Google Sheet for if you did a globe observation for mosquitoes, clouds, land cover, or trees. Did you create a video, work in a group, do some research, attend to meetings, whatever you did, we want you to keep track of in that spreadsheet. And at the end of the internship, total the column of your hours and send it to us. That's part of your final work.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Good. Well, once again, I thank you, Philippe, for thanking us, but I want to thank you for being so understanding, as we have had some issues in, especially with the time zone stuff. It's been really complicated, and I'm time zone challenged to begin with. So I probably have actually exacerbated the problem. Evan, I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I've had trouble. I think I sent Cassie my email. I haven't gotten like a confirmation for like a Canvas account. I'm still not in that yet.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, can I just tell you here the email I'm using?
Go ahead and type it into the chat. That would be great.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks. And, we understand that it takes people a while to get in. There's no hard deadline for these activities. You got to keep up so that you don't have, so these little things don't get in the way of when we actually begin to do the research. But we fully expect it's going to take a few days for people to get on, get settled, get the emails right, and so on and so forth. So please, thank you for your patience. Okay. Evan, do you have another question? You have a question?
Yeah. Hi. I was wondering, I believe I heard that we had to sign in to the speaker series lectures. through, I believe, through the chat. We need to do that still for attendance purposes.
I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Yeah, Cassie, we don't, do they?
No, we just want you to keep track on our activity tracker of the sessions that you attended. Don't just say see speaker, but give us the date and the title of what you went to.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Good. We're
Kevin, you
all
should have put your in now to the Canvas.
okay, great. We're trying really hard to make this virtual thing work and work smoothly. So bear with us. I think it's an experiment, but I think it's going to be a successful one. So this is great. Okay, well, I'd like to get started today. We're initially expecting to have Manu Prakash talking today. I talked to his lab this morning and he's been ill. And so I'm going to flip this out and we're going to talk a little bit about a talk that I had already prepared for next week that we'll just do this week about climate change and mosquitoes. And we're hoping that we'll be able to get Manu to come and talk to us at another time when he's feeling better. So I'm going to share my screen now. There we go. And can you all see the screen? Excellent. Okay, I'm going to play from the current slide. Okay, so this is actually, it works out really well to talk just a little bit about connecting our mosquito friends or frenemies to the NASA mission and climate change. And so what I'm doing today is just to give you a little bit of background. This is informal, so please post your questions in the chat, and then I will have plenty of time for questions at the end. So let's just get going here. And we just did the logistics. We're going to talk a little bit about mosquito habitats, what mosquitoes need to grow and thrive, and then some of the changes that are going to be happening because of climate change and how this is going to impact mosquitoes. So this is a beautiful slide showing our app. If there's anybody who's had trouble with their app, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and Cassie will be watching that to see, but hopefully everyone has been able to at least download it, and hopefully at least in the next couple of days you will have been able to use it to document where you put a mosquito trap and what the land cover is around that. So go ahead and put your comments and issues in the chat. Okay, so this is one of my favorite. Yeah, and please mute your
car wash.
Yeah, please mute.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is from something called the Zine, and you can actually download this, particularly if you have like sisters or brothers or young people that might be interested in learning more about mosquitoes. This is a really cool little zine that was created that basically talks people through using the app. And it features 3 mosquitoes, Wanda, Hester, and Maurice. And they all have really big personalities, even though they're little mosquitoes. And here is Maurice, and Hester is asking, what are you wearing, Maurice? Haven't you heard? NASA is interested in mosquitoes like us. I want to be the first mosquito in the NASA astronaut program. Okay. And poor Maurice, because NASA is not interested in putting mosquitoes in space, but they are interested in the warm, moist places where mosquitoes like to live. And we see this in images that we derive and data that we derive from remote sensing. And so this is kind of the connection. This is the NASA connection to the things that we're going to be doing on the ground. And that's how we're going to connect it to what's up in space. So I'm hoping, and go ahead and put right in the chat, please. If you have already built your mosquito trap habitat. And so if you've built a habitat, you might have used a cup or a bucket. This third image here is the mosquito trap. And Cassie is going to link you to a video, right, Cassie? That nice video that Ryan sent about how to build this kind of trap if you're interested. I know that one person today, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, it was such a busy weekend, but one person was saying that they're concerned about the traps attracting mosquitoes and they don't want that. And so I just want to say that mosquitoes are not attracted to water unless they're ready to lay their eggs. And if they're ready to lay their eggs, they're not biting people because they've already had their blood meal. So by having a mosquito habitat in your backyard, you're not encouraging more biting mosquitoes to come to your yard, if that makes any sense to you. But if you don't want to use the open container kind of trap, we do have this other one made with a plastic bottle. It tends to have it tends to trap fewer mosquitoes. So last year, a lot of our interns went to another trap design, but you're welcome to use both. But if you look at all these different habitats, you can see that there's one thing in common with all of them, which is they hold still water. So whether it is a lake or a pond or a stagnating irrigation ditch, all of these things, plant pots, old tires, and even holes in trees that have water or inside plants, in between leaves and plants. These are places where mosquitoes live. And what they're looking for is someplace shady, someplace where there's a food source, and they eat microorganisms that are found in water. Vegetation nearby is important because it provides some shade. The mother mosquito is looking for a place where they think they're not going to find many predators, which is why they tend to like these darker environments. And then last but not least, you find mosquitoes where there usually is a population of animals, people or animals, because the mosquitoes need a blood meal. Okay. So here's the story about mosquito life and climate. So, temperature and rainfall are both things that impact where you find mosquitoes. And different factors are important in different stages of the life cycle. So here you have the life cycle of mosquito. You've got the adult there. She lays some eggs. The legs develop and become larvae. That's what we're actually monitoring in our traps. If you leave those larvae for 3 to 5 days, you're going to see a pupa, and then the pupa then becomes a live mosquito, and the whole cycle starts again. But most importantly is that the mosquitoes need to be, in order to for the larvae to grow, they have to be about 45 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It can be a lot hotter than that, but it can't be colder than that, because if so, the mosquitoes will just sort of languish, and they will just grow glow very slowly or not at all, and then they will be able to persist until the conditions are right. So what this means is that there is sort of this timing factor that the cold or hot, dry or wet, they need to happen at different times during the cycle. And these factors can play a role in drastically increasing the population of mosquitoes or drastically decreasing the population of mosquitoes. And in the work we did last year, you may know that last year here out in the West, we had a severe drought, and more than 50% of our mosquito mappers were in the West. And we found relatively few mosquitoes compared to previous years. And so that's just one of the ways that mosquitoes are reacting to the kind of climate that you have. So now let's talk about mosquitoes and climate change. And this is a really important topic. The IPCC, which is the International Panel on Climate Change, released a comment a few years ago that mosquito-borne diseases are, of all the diseases that impact people, they are the ones most sensitive to changes in climate, and the category of diseases that we expect to increase dramatically because of a warming climate. So go ahead and put it in the chat if you are interested. Does anybody here have any questions about climate change or whether or not climate change is real? Because we can have those discussions too, but this is really my favorite graph. This is a graph that comes from the NASA Climate 365 project. It says some people can't agree. It says some people say that scientists can't agree on Earth's temperature changes, but if you look at NASA, NOAA, the Met Office in Great Britain, or in Japan, look at the overlap here. These graphs are really, really close. The differences that we see are not statistically significant. So anyway, as a scientist, there has not been much. There has really been very little discussion about whether or not climate change is real. And when I started doing my work as a graduate student in 1994, before it became politicized, everybody basically agreed that climate change was happening. And then there began to be media discussions about whether or not there was a strong signal there. So if you want to learn more about this, there is a great website. It's called skepticalscience.org, and you can go there and look at all the data that you want as well. But for this purposes of this discussion, we are assuming that this climate change that we are experiencing today is in fact something that we're going to have to deal with, for years to come. So mosquitoes speak for themselves, and climate change has already impacted where we find mosquitoes. And mosquito seasons are getting longer. Some cities have seasons that are more than a month longer than they were in 1980. And this is actually kind of why someone like myself, who started out in climate change science, got invested and involved in mosquitoes. And this is because, if you're trying to explain to people that climate is changing, it's really hard if you're not in Alaska and you're seeing changes in permafrost. It's hard to really wrap your head around it. If you're not, in Texas or in Louisiana or in Florida, and you're seeing, increased numbers of hurricanes, for instance, there's really not a lot to tell you what's happening. But mosquitoes, they are something that everybody is interacting with more or less, depending on where they live. So when I was thinking, like, how can you talk about climate change in a way that's impactful, is real? And it was always like, what is more real, than a mosquito bite? And so that's how I got involved in climate change. I became much more of a mosquito biologist through my interest in climate change. So that's really that connection there. But the diseases are in the news, and you can expect to see in the news articles about Eastern equine encephalitis, West Nile virus. Those are two that we have here in the US every summer. Zika and dengue are diseases that are really concentrated in South America, but we have had cases here in the US. And we see that as being a challenge that we may see in the future as well. So with respect to mosquito-borne diseases, here's an article. This is a couple years old, but it hasn't changed. Mosquito-borne diseases can reach an extra 1 billion people as climate warms. So that is kind of a big deal. Okay. So how does climate change affect mosquitoes? So it's really complicated, just like we talked last week about the Earth system, where everything changes. If there's a change in the biosphere, it's going to change the atmosphere, it's going to change the hydrosphere, it's going to change the Earth's surface. If you have a change in the atmosphere, like changes in CO2, it's going to change life, it's going to impact the oceans, and it's going to impact the land. So it really is complicated. And we need to consider both direct impacts and indirect impacts. And then when you begin to talk about diseases like West Nile virus, you have to think about other species that are involved in the transmission cycle, like birds. So it really, really is complicated. Whoops. That was not what I wanted to do. There we go. So you don't have to remember these, but I just wanted to basically convey the complexity. Mosquitoes, because they are poikilotherms, they're organisms that cannot regulate their own temperature. They're highly sensitive to changes in the climate system. And so what happens is the mosquitoes will change their geographical distribution, their seasonal distribution, their latitudinal distribution, as well as altitudinal distribution. And these changes in where they're located will also have impacts on the diseases where they transmit. And so we can look at some direct climate change effects on disease vectors. There's temperature, winds. We just found out a year and a half ago that some mosquitoes can actually jump on an air current, and they can ride that current for 200 to 400 kilometers. This is something we never knew before, but it explains a lot of interesting questions we've had in Africa for a long time. Global precipitation patterns will also be important, and changes in relative humidity. And these things don't change just not only where they're found, but also the changes in temperature and humidity also have effects on the lifespan of the vector and on the genetic composition of the vector. So, boy, you have to put together, biological kinds of responses, population kinds of responses, ecosystem kinds of responses, and you suddenly have a very complex system that you're dealing with. But we also have then the indirect climate change effects. So if you have desertification and drought, you'll have reduced density of water, places where the mosquitoes can actually put their eggs, but places that are once like flowing water can dry down to little puddles, and then you can get increased amounts. So you can't always say that when it gets dry, you get less mosquitoes. Also, in a lot of countries where they don't have plumbed water, people will, when you have a drought, people will store more water in barrels and jugs around their house, and that creates more mosquito habitat. So you can see that there are a lot of different interactions between where the water is, changes in the vegetation, changes in agricultural practices. All these things will affect mosquitoes. And then lastly, mosquitoes are not the only species that are impacted by climate change. People too. And so people are moving around as well as mosquitoes. And when people move around, when they travel, they can bring mosquitoes with them. And this is one of the problems that we had. The reason how we got Zika in the US in 2016 was because people had traveled from South America. They came to Florida. They were in Miami, Dade County, and the conditions were right for those Aedes aegypti mosquitoes that came in. And so they transmitted the disease between the mosquitoes, and then people can transmit Zika directly through bodily fluids. And that's how we began to get a outbreak of Zika in Miami-Dade County. And it cost $26 million to nip that in the bud. So you can see in just one county. So you can see that this is a very serious health problem. It's also an economic challenge for us to address. But people, birds, mosquitoes, we all are impacted by climate. And so if climate changes can support potential vectors, this is the problem if people transport those pathogens home. And so let's imagine someone was bitten by a mosquito. They have Zika in their blood. They are then bit by another mosquito. That mosquito then has Zika in its body. And then the pathogen will reproduce in the mosquito and then come to a critical level. And then when they bite someone else, they transmit the pathogen. So this is, so once again, it's, people are involved, birds are involved, mosquitoes are involved, and it's quite a complicated system. But from all those things I just showed you, the most important thing for you to remember is if you have increased warming, you're going to have increased mosquitoes. And you probably remember from biology, for every 10 degrees of increase in temperature, you have a doubling of rates of chemical reactions, more or less. Well, this is the same true metabolically. If it's warmer, they mature faster. They have higher reproduction rates. They have exponential population increases. They have higher biting rates, and it's complex and nonlinear. So this is one of the reasons why we really need to understand mosquitoes better and its connection with climate change, and why, where, and when we find mosquitoes on the landscape. So we're almost done here with the little bit of the science background that I'm giving you, but this is a nice map because it shows you how computer images have changed between 1960 and now. But on the left is an image from the CDC of where we found Aedes aegypti in 1960. And Aedes aegypti is not a mosquito that is, this is the yellow fever mosquito. This mosquito is responsible for chikungunya and dengue and Zika and yellow fever and many other diseases. So what you see is that in 1960, there was just one area where they had seen a few isolated cases of this particular mosquito. By 2014, you can see that this mosquito is now spread into a much broader area, concentrated in the southeastern part of the US. So that's 2014. Let's move a little bit further into time. And here are known occurrences of mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus. And Aedes albopictus is another mosquito that is an invasive mosquito that also can transmit these same diseases. It comes from, not from South America, it actually comes from Southeast Asia. And this mosquito actually came to the US in used tires. So remember how I said tires are a really beloved place for mosquitoes to lay their eggs? Well, when we began the used tire trade and we began bringing tires across the ocean, when there was rain in the taking place, rain would get caught in those tires and they become wonderful mosquito habitats. And then Aedes albopictus was moved from the Southeast Asia to the US. So let's take a picture. I want to have you take a really good look at the Aedes albopictus map. And I would like you to say, just take a minute. And Cassie, I cannot see the chat while I'm presenting, but can you tell me anything that you think is suspicious about this map? So take a look on the map on the right, and what do you think is suspicious about this distribution pattern? And Cassie, go ahead and tell me what people say.
I'm ready.
Yay.
Alabama.
Yes. What is strange about, why do you think you have fewer mosquitoes in Alabama than any place around it?
There's less mosquitoes in Mexico.
Yeah, but that's...
I'm just reading comments.
Yep. So let's look at that Alabama thing. Do you think there's really less mosquitoes in Alabama, or do you think that this is an artifact of sampling?
Water is less stagnant. It may be a data collection as opposed to an issue of actual mosquito distribution.
I think that's exactly the answer, because if you see that all around Alabama, there's a lot more mosquitoes, and you can see that even if you went in there, you can see there's almost a grid pattern of where they found mosquitoes in Mississippi, right? And so I think that probably, Alabama has just not had as well developed a surveillance system as these other places. Okay, how about Oklahoma? Do you think that there's that many mosquitoes in Oklahoma, but there isn't in Arkansas or Missouri? Or do you think that's a sampling issue as well?
Evan says he lives there.
Well, what can you tell me?
Lots of mosquitoes.
Yeah. So once again, I think that what we're seeing here, when you look at Missouri and Arkansas, what you're seeing is, these are areas where they just didn't have well-established mosquito surveillance that was taking place in 2014. But this is really important because when we begin to look at our own data, we have to remember that where we're finding mosquitoes and where we're finding concentrations of mosquitoes in our data may not represent what we're seeing in the real world as a whole. We probably are seeing the effect of our sampling strategy. And so this is an important thing, and we can work with it, but always to keep that aware. So I think this is a wonderful test to show you how that sampling can play a big role in what you are actually reporting. So here is a different map, and these maps are built basically on that same data. And so what you see here is when they say their ability to live and reproduce, basically they have looked at temperature and they have looked at precipitation, and then they have compared the environmental factors that are favorable for Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, and then just mapped it that way, the same way that you might map a growing zone for the USDA, right? And so this doesn't really tell you very much about where those mosquitoes are found, but it does tell you where the conditions are where they could live and reproduce, but not exactly where they are. So it's really important just to see where this data is and where it comes from. And these two maps are basically the same map you just saw, but described in a different way. Okay, so let's talk about what's going to happen in the future. So we have a nice animation of this, but it just goes too fast. So I just put it here just to show you. So above is 2018. That's the most recent data for global yellow fever mosquito distribution. 2050, where we expect it to be, and 2080. And so, here in this blue box, what I've done is I've just clipped the US in 2018, and just so you can see really clearly that you're seeing a northern movement of the range of mosquitoes. In the months allowed, you're going to have more of the US is going to have 7 months of mosquito season, and you're going to, and way up into the Yukon, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 months of mosquitoes, which right now it cannot support those mosquitoes there. And you can see that same pattern if you compare Africa in 2018 to Africa in 2080. You can see that the range is moving to the upper latitudes, also in the southern hemisphere. So this is a problem, and it's getting bigger. And so this is one reason why we need to have the Earth's observing satellites telling us what's happening with climate, tracking those changes, tracking the mosquitoes. And this is how we're actually able to understand the threat of disease for people. Okay, so this is why we use mosquitoes to talk about climate change, or why I do, because it makes it local, it makes it concrete, and it makes it personally meaningful, because you've got to put some Benadryl on your skin, right? So anyway, that's what we're doing. Now, next week, you're going to be working on an ArcGIS map for our whole group. And I'm going to ask you to figure out how many days more or less you have in mosquito danger days. And this is getting back to that idea that the seasonality of mosquitoes in a warming climate has increased in most places, but not all places. For instance, there have not been many changes in Honolulu because the conditions were good to begin with, and they are still good. On the other hand, in Reno, Nevada, there were just a few mosquito days that were available, and now it's almost 2 months longer season. So here's 3 examples. I know from where I'm from, it's about 12 days difference. So it's going to be different for everyone, but we're going to ask you just for fun to take a look at this. There's a little graph, a little thing you just put in your city and it will show you the graph. And then we're going to ask you to grab that graph and put it in our map so we can sort of see sort of across the US how this has changed. But this is something we're going to do next week, so you don't have to worry about it for now. But anyway, that is, a quick half-hour discussion of how mosquitoes are connected to NASA science, and how and why the satellite data is so important for us to understand vector-borne disease. And when we start the meetup and do science, which is going to be happening tomorrow, what time, Cassie?
I have 1 p.m. Central Time.
That's exactly right. I wanted to make sure. So 1 p.m. Central Time, we're going to have our first meetup and do science. Peter Nelson, who is our land cover specialist, he's been on vacation. His only vacation week was last week, so I said, just go ahead, go do that. But he will be talking to us from a roadside stand somewhere between Minnesota and Oregon, and it's going to talk to us a little bit about land cover and the connection to mosquitoes. So don't miss that. And if you cannot come during the day on Tuesday, we will have a similar talk on Wednesday. At what time, Cassie?
On Wednesday, I have 6 o'clock Central Time.
6 o'clock Central Time. Perfect. Okay. All right. So now it's time to just get your thoughts. I'm going to go through the chat and see if there's any interesting questions. Oh, lots of really cool comments too. Great. But are there any questions that you have about what we just talked about? And it's really more interesting if you guys ask questions than if I just blah, blah, blah. And so I try not to blah, blah, blah more than half an hour at any one time. 20 minutes is probably enough of me. And now I'd like to hear from you. So if you've learned anything, if you have any questions, or if you have any comments or your personal experience with mosquitoes, we'd like to hear them now. We've got another 15 minutes before we're going to end up today. So please raise your hand. Juliana.
Yeah, sorry. I have a quick question actually on how we should position our own mosquito traps. Is there a minimum distance that there should be in between each of them so they don't sort of contaminate one another? Let's say a mosquito eats from one and lays in the other. Is that something we should worry about? So in my case, I have a little bit less than a foot between them at the moment. And I was wondering, should we enlarge that distance or?
I don't think so, because if you're doing a trapping experiment, as I hope most of you can do, where you have 5 or at a minimum 3 different treatments of your trap, it doesn't matter how close they are because they're going to be selecting between the 3 spots, right? And so I don't think it really impacts it whatsoever. So I think that if you've got one great place which is near a bush and somewhat shaded, you can put them all in the same spot. That's fine. We've had people who have done experiments where they have had exactly the same trap but have put it in different places, because they actually had a big yard or a space that they could use, and that's another opportunity too. But no, it doesn't matter unless that's your variable. Great question, Juliana. And anybody else have a question about this presentation or about your traps?
Do you see the question? Do we use a similar design for all 5 traps or a different design for each trap?
That's a great question. And so you can do either, if you want to have the same bait, and I would suggest using grass or fermented grass or alfalfa tablets or fish food. Best, I think, is grass, from what I read from Allison's paper that you looked at this week. But if you do that and you want to have 5 or 3 different kinds of traps, that's great too. But then use the same bait, right? And make the kind of trap your variable. So that'd be awesome. So let's talk to Yuvraj.
Hi. So
and say your name so I get it right.
Yeah, Yuvraj, you got it correct.
Oh, great, thanks.
So I just had a quick question. I was wondering how many days we should wait before we should expect to see our first mosquito larva, because I haven't noticed any on mine yet, and so I was just curious if I like set up my trap wrong or something, and I wanted
Nope.
to know how long it should take.
Nope. And where are you located, Yavraj?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Yeah. So it might, it might take them a couple weeks to even find your spot. So I wouldn't worry about that. Once you get eggs in your trap and they get wet, then it will take about 3 to 5 days till you get a larva, and then that larva will become a pupa in about 3 to 5 days. And so that's why we ask people to look at their trap every week, because you could probably get, you probably will not have mosquitoes hatching before 1 week with your traps. So
Okay.
yeah, it's random. You might be the unlucky person that gets to put lots of zeros in, or the lucky person that gets to use a lot of zeros when you using your trap. And that's one of the problems that's associated with this kind of research, and why we really need to get citizen scientists involved, because it is so much of it is a stochastic kind of phenomenon. But great question. Thank you, Yuvraj. And now I want to talk to Garima.
Hi, so I had a couple questions. First, so can we make like 5 of the same traps and then change it as we read more articles about like different strategies?
You absolutely can. Just keep track in a notebook of what you're doing, right? So, for instance, let's say you have a kind of trap that's out, and nothing has worked, and it's been 2 weeks, and you think you'd like to try a different kind of trap. You can just put in your notes, okay, you're going to start over with a different trap, but really give yourself a couple of weeks, because it takes a while for those mosquitoes to find those places. So thanks. Yeah, it's up to you. It's your experiment. So great. Okay, so Aitan. I got that wrong again. Go ahead, say your name again.
It's Aton.
Aitan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I leave for a trip tomorrow. I'll be back by Sunday. But should I worry about already finding pupas before I even get back, and then I get back and they're already developed or anything? I'm in Miami, so mosquitoes are very easy to get here.
Yeah, in Miami, you could in a week actually have something develop.
So should I be worried about missing out on observations while I'm gone?
No, you should not. No, I mean, this is why we do it for 8 weeks. If you go away for a week, it's not a big deal. But no, I would not, unless you have the safe trap. If you have the safe trap, which has a little piece of nylon net at the bottom and it uses a pop bottle, they tend to not be as attracted to that trap as other traps. But you could set that trap out, and then collect your data. And then if any mosquitoes actually become adults, they can't get out. So there's no problem. So you might want to consider that if you want to. And Cassie, can you put that video up in the chat that Ryan sent, or did you do that already?
I didn't, but I will.
Yeah, there's a really great little 1-minute TikTok video that one of my research colleagues that I'm working on a project with had his lab student make, and it's great. It just shows you how to make the trap in 1 minute. So you can check that out. The hardest part about making the trap is you got to drink 2 gallons of Coke or Sprite or something. So yeah. Okay. Let's see. Imran.
Hi. So I don't know if this was previously addressed, but in the event of a major weather event, how should we handle our traps?
Great question. Great question. So it depends on what kind of major weather event you have. If you have something like a hurricane, it's going to be really doubly important that you have that trap out there. So just make sure you got some rocks in there so it doesn't blow away. If it's a really bad hurricane, you're not going to be able to protect yourself, your trap from it. So yeah, I think it's just business as usual, whether or not you have an extreme weather event or not. It's a great question, but we can't be prepared for all contingencies, and you just have a whole of data in that week, and just make sure you just put that in your notebook. Great
All right,
question.
thank you so much.
You bet. Evan, you've got a question here? Evan, are you there?
Sorry about that. I was wondering, what do we do with the pupa after we, write them down?
Great question. So, once you get your mosquito, your clip-on microscope, you can actually look at your larva, and you can use the built-in key to determine what kind of species, what genera or species that you might have. And all the instructions are in the app. But once it becomes a pupa, you can't tell anymore, because pupas are undergoing metamorphosis. That's like a monarch butterfly in a chrysalis, right? It's kind of gooey, and it's kind of, it's like in between stages. And so if you've got a larva, you can identify it. If it's a pupa, you can just count it and just say, okay, I got this many pupa, and just let it go. But with respect to discarding those organisms before they become adults, you can just pour them out on the ground, because if they are not in water, they will not survive. So if you just pour them on the ground, they will die and they will not mature to adults. And that's what we want.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Jocelyn.
Hi, I was just wondering how many traps we were supposed to set.
Great. So we suggest 5. If you can possibly manage it, that's great. Now, people who are living, for instance, in apartment complexes, there may not be 5 places where you can put the traps that are nearby. So that's kind of, so that's fine. Maybe you can just do 3. Or maybe if you just have a balcony where you feel like you can do it, maybe you can just do 1. But with a large group like this, we're going to get enough data from everyone if most people have between 3 and 5 traps. But we've had people that have done 10 traps. We've had people that have done 2 traps. So it just depends. And everybody's situation is unique. And we don't have a controlled lab environment. Everybody has their own home lab environment. And so we have to accommodate that. So yeah, thanks for your question. It's a really good one. And I should have made that clear earlier. And now we're ready to talk to Ryan.
Hi, is there a variable with the traps that's like less documented, like they're changed during the experiment, that you'd like to see more documented?
Wow, that's a really great question. And, typically what we have had people do is they've changed the bait. That seems to be something that people really like to do. I'm very interested in some of the work that Allison Parker did, where she was able to demonstrate statistically significantly that mosquitoes tend to like bigger water bodies. So she had more success in large buckets than in small Starbucks container sizes. So I think that would be a very interesting thing to see if we can actually reproduce that kind of experiment. But it's like I say, whatever is interesting to you, go ahead and do it. And then if you got a question, just ping me.
Thank you.
I love the question. Thank you. Nicole.
Hi, so I just had a quick question about the traps as well. Should we be worried about things like any other wildlife interfering with them, or like, for example, if we have like fish food in it, should we be worried about like other things getting into the traps, or like that kind of thing?
Yes, that's going to be a variable. And when I did my master's research, I wasn't always doing mosquitoes. Like I actually started with pollen analysis, trying to understand changes over time for the last 12,000 years. And I was doing a control study in the Pryor Mountains, Montana, and I set up these pollen traps where basically they're aerodynamically designed like a wing of an airplane. So it kind of sucks the air in with the pollen in it, right? It's very, very cool. But what happened is I had lots of insects that fell into my trap, and some of those insects were pollinators. So what do you think they had on their legs? Tons of pollen, right? And so, yeah, this is something that's, this is one of the experimental challenges that we have. And if you see other things in your trap, I would just note that you have it, and that should be fine.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yep, I learned that one the hard way, but I still got good data, so it was okay. Aria, is it Aria?
Yeah.
Hi, Aria.
So as of now, I have like 5 plastic to-go containers in my backyard, but like my parents are concerned about, you mentioned this earlier, but like attracting mosquitoes, especially after the pupa have developed, I guess. So
Mhm.
would you recommend I keep those containers and just try to pour out the pupa, or like construct traps even though I don't have five
This is a
2 liter
great,
bottles?
yes, thank you, Aria. That's a great question. So once you have larva or pupa in the traps, I want you to remove them. So if you look in your trap and you see larva or you see pupa, I want you to remove them. I want you to count them. If you're able to identify them, all the better. But you don't want those mosquitoes to turn into adults, because then you'll have biting adults. The traps themselves will not increase the possibility that mosquitoes will come to your yard that are going to be biting, because like I said, the mosquitoes that are looking for water are mosquitoes that already have well-developed eggs. They've already had their blood meal, and so they're going to drop their eggs off and then go their merry way. But you don't want to have those mosquitoes sitting in that trap and maturing into adults and then flying away, because we do not want to make the situation worse. Our whole research is trying to ultimately make this better, right? And to develop ways that we can identify these places so that we can remediate them and not have this happen. So, if you have any other questions, Aria, if your folks want to talk to me, that's fine. But yeah, basically, as long as you don't let the larva or the pupa turn into adults, you'll be just fine. And just take a look at them where do you live?
Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, California. Yeah. So you would have a short cycle. So probably, if you look at it every 5 days or so, you will make sure that you don't have any any adults developing.
Hi,
Thanks
thank
very
you.
much. Yeah, really great question. Paxton.
Hi. When
Hi.
should we aim on deciding on a variable?
What? When?
Sorry. Yeah, like when? Like when should we aim on having that?
Yeah, we're all getting started this week. So sometime this week would be great. I would expect everybody to have at least 1 or 2 or 3 traps up, maybe by the weekend. So, the first week we're all, like people aren't on Canvas yet, and we're still getting things together. And so there's really no expectation that everybody's going to have everything, done. But I think by Friday, if you had your traps out, that would be fantastic. Great. And it doesn't have to be a big decision, because, like I said, we are a group experiment, right? So, if you decide on doing something and then someone else has a different idea, we'll come up with some things that we can say at the end of this from all of our data. Okay, Garima.
Hi, I had more questions.
Yeah.
So, 1, how do we remove the larva? And 2, for documenting the mosquito habitat with the app, do we do it for all our traps or just one if they're in the same location?
That's a really good question. I would do them. Let me think. If they're all in the same location, I think that you only have to do it once. But in your notebook, you have to differentiate between them, because in the app is going to give you a lat long, and they're probably all going to be at the same place. So it's okay. I mean, you could do it either way you want, but if you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, you can just use your app once. Okay, great question. But do make sure that you definitively document which traps have the mosquitoes and things like that, because that's data that probably anyone else, that's using the app, the data that we're collecting, they're not going to be interested in that, because that's not their experiment, but it is of interest to us. Okay. Is there anybody else with a pressing question? All right.
The equipment, we were told, was sent out last week, and I think with the holiday that was last Monday, delivery might be delayed depending on how far away from Austin, Texas you are, because that was where they were sent from.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know that, because several people have written me about the scopes. And Dominic, I think you can be the last question today.
Okay. I don't have a question about like the mosquitoes exactly. I'm asking about meetings. So tomorrow we have a meeting at 1 p.m. Central Time, And then Wednesday, we have a meeting at 6 p.m. Central Time.
Right. And you can do either or, because we're going to do the
Okay.
same thing. And we're doing this because some people have jobs. And so they can't go in the evening because they're working in the evening. And so we have a daytime one. And some people are still in school. And so we have an evening one. So both sessions will be pretty much the same material. So we're
Okay.
only asking you to go to just one. And I think we can do one more question. Govind?
So if a large amount of detritus, like mine is under like pretty good canopy cover, like some, it's just like a tree, and a lot of leaves keeps falling into the trap. So it becomes kind of difficult to see if there are any eggs or anything in the first place, I guess. So is it a good idea to, like, a lot of flies as well actually fall in. So is it a good idea to remove some of those, or is it better to leave it as?
No, I think I would remove them. I would remove them. Yeah, just pull them out. And then somebody asked a question, which I kind of spaced out. I'm sorry about that, about how to get the larva out of your trap. And the easiest way to do it is just to take your trap and pour all the water out. And, you can screen it using a piece of net. Or the best way to do it, because those little bodies are kind of fragile. And so what I suggest is getting like a turkey baster, a small turkey baster, and you can just suck the mosquito larvae out with the turkey baster, and then put them in a small container, and then dump out the water and start afresh. So that's how I would do it.
Rusty, Dominic asked, or Nathaniel, I'm sorry, for week 1 reading, is it expected that students read all the tables and figures?
Okay, if you read the Canvas, I actually say no, you don't have to do that. And one thing that we have put in there is I just put, just in case, when you're in school, you have to read, like your teacher says you want to read this, and you have to read the whole thing. Because it's like a textbook, and so it's really dense material. In a scientific article, you'll be using sort of the same technique that scientists use to read articles, which is, first I read the abstract. Is it interesting? Okay. Then I read the introduction, and that gives me an idea of what it's about. And then I read the conclusion. Okay. Is it interesting what they come up with? And then I look at the figures to see if there's anything in the figures that's interesting. But I can get most of the story from those things. And I just don't have time to read every article, and you don't either. And so I do not expect you to sit there and read all the statistical analyses of the different kinds of mosquitoes that were found in different places. It's irrelevant information for us at this point. But so, yeah, in all the articles that we give you, except there's one exception, which is a review article that I think is fantastic cover to cover. But all of them, read the abstract, read the introduction, read the conclusion, look at the figures. And maybe you read one of the figures, you go, oh, that's really cool, because I'm actually doing something with the volume of containers. And maybe you want to read that little part of that section. But yeah, no, we want to make this, we don't want to waste your time. And we want you to develop these really useful science research skills. So yeah, less is more. But here's the thing: when you read the article, maybe Govind says, "Oh wow, I'm really interested in reading about these buckets," and maybe Dominic was interested in saying, "Gee, it looks like they have a lot of anopheles here, and I'm really surprised. I didn't know anopheles were found in New York or Kentucky." And so, maybe you will read a little bit about that, and then in the discussion, you're supposed to write 3 or 4 sentences about what you read, and what you thought about it, or add your conclusions, or do some brainstorming. And so when you read other people's brainstorms, you'll also get other insights. You'll get other information that maybe you didn't glean from the article. And so this is how we're sharing information as a team and making the best use of all of our time. Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much today for coming to this session. And it will be available for everybody else as a recording, but we had a really great turnout today. And I will see some of you tomorrow, and I'll introduce Peter Nelson to you at 1CT. And then on Wednesday, I'll introduce Peter Nelson to you at 6 CT. So see you one of those times. Have a great day. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.